Berzerk spoke to me. I mean, it literally spoke to me. The 1980 multi-directional shooter was one of the first video games to feature synthesized speech. Boasting a 30-word vocabulary at an estimated cost of $1,000 per word, it was capable of rasping phrases such as
"Chicken, fight like a robot, the humanoid must not escape,"
and coin detected in pocket, which was yelled at passers-by during its attract mode. It's a deeply influential game, leading to the likes of Robotron 2084, Smash TV, Gauntlet, and modern twin-stick shooters. Berzerk's designer Alan McNeil was apparently inspired by a stark black and white dream he had, in which he was playing an Escape the Robots game similar to one developed for the Unix operating system in the mid-70s. Known as Robots in the US and Daleks in the UK, it looked very similar to what would eventually become Berzerk, albeit turn-based. When McNeil came to create his dream game, he borrowed its title from the 1976 sci-fi series Berzerkers, written by one Fred Saberhagen. The stories revolved around a race of self-replicating robotic machines whose aim was to eliminate all life. Berzerk was a famously intense experience as the robot enemies honed in on you like high street clipboard wankers, but it also boasted one of the most terrifying video game enemies of all time, Evil Otto, represented by a bouncing yellow smiley face that would appear if the player was taking too long to complete a screen. The indestructible Otto was named by McNeil in honour of a college security guard he'd encountered who would smile as he chewed you out. The character was born from McNeil witnessing players dawdling instead of finishing a level, though the smiley face graphic was initially intended as a placeholder. McNeil originally planned to replace it with a more complex graphic, but started to appreciate the absurdity of a lethal, unstoppable, disembodied, smiling head. The appearance of Otto on screen is what led to the game's title, as you went berserk trying to clear the screen of enemies while avoiding the immutable grinning circle. Unfortunately, Evil Otto has another, rather more unfortunate legacy. The character is alleged to have been indirectly responsible for the first ever real-life video game death. Maybe. Legend has it that in January 1981, while playing on Berzerk at Friar Tuck's game room in Calumet City, Illinois, 19-year-old Jeff Daly succeeded in posting a high score of 16,660. A few hours later, Daly is alleged to have dropped dead from a heart attack. The best guess is that Jeff Daly's death is an urban legend. According to obituaries and the Social Security Death Index, the only Jeff Dalys to have died in Illinois in January 1981 were either elderly men or a youth who perished in a car accident. What is undeniable, however, is that in April 1982, Berzerk was indeed indirectly responsible for the death of a teenager. A report in the October 1982 issue of Video Games read, Peter Bukursky had not been drinking when he arrived at Friar Tuck's game room in Calumet City, Illinois. He hadn't been using drugs either. According to the owner of Friar Tuck's, Peter and a friend walked in about 8:30 p.m. Saturday, April the 3rd, and went straight to the games. Peter was 18, likeable and apparently healthy. An A student, he had plans to become a doctor someday. Peter was also good with the games. In 15 minutes of play, he wrote his initials at least twice in the top 10 on the Berzerk screen. Then, tired of that game, he turned, took about 4 steps, dropped his quarter into a second machine, and collapsed. By 9 p.m, Peter was dead. The cause? Weird bum smell. Heart attack. Was the game to blame? Yes and no, Lake County's Deputy Coroner Mark Allen told Video Games. Bukowski's autopsy revealed that he had scar tissue around his heart and speculates that the stress of playing Berzerk, combined with the teenager's weakened valves, triggered the attack. The article continued, profits aside, it turns out that video game playing is a lot more stressful than most people think. Next time you're in an arcade, take a few moments to watch the other players. Notice the twitches of concentration, the way some players' hands and feet shiver in excitement. Often they pound machines as if they were battling real invaders. If you play the games to relax after a long day, think again. If you're a cardiac patient, you might want to stay at the bar. Unfortunately, Peter Bukowski was never given this advice. Scaremongering? Just a bit. Certainly in the wake of Bukowski's death, TV news crews hounded Friar Tuck's, while Weekly World News led with the front page headline, "Teen Killed by Video Game." Berzerk's real legacy might not be that it was the first game to kill a player, but as the game which gave birth to video game scare stories. In fact, according to Friar Tuck's former owner, Tom Blankley, as the story spread, arcades began removing Berzerk from their establishments. Following Bukowski's fatal heart attack and the rumours of Jeff Daly's death in its wake, Berzerk continued to be associated with other health scares. Joel West was a legendary gamer with a history of high scores on Berzerk, who died last December at the tender age of 58. However, a story in his local newspaper alleged that West had almost died 6 years earlier while playing Berzerk's sequel, Frenzy. West had reportedly cleared 5 days in his schedule to take on Frenzy in an attempt to beat the world record. The marathon was being live streamed by one Grant Thieneman, the current Berzerk record holder. The further the marathon went, the worse he was getting health-wise, Thieneman told the Charlotte Observer. But it was almost like the worse he felt, the better he played. At 3 a.m, he was throwing up in a bucket, but playing the best Frenzy I've ever seen him play. I mean, he just wanted it. Bad. I made the decision right there to turn off the game. I was like, I'm not going to be the guy that gets a legend who was in, Life magazine in the 80s, killed. If he hates me for it, I don't care. I remember looking at him and I said, Joel, I'm sorry, and I cut the game off. Reportedly, West spent 6 days in hospital, suffering from dehydration, cellulitis, blood poisoning, and a serious infection due to an undiagnosed case of diabetes. The story gets stranger still, with a third death related to Berzerk, once again happening at Friar Tuck's game room in Calumet City and involving the exact same machine reported to have triggered Peter Bukowski's fatal heart attack. In 1988, a 17-year-old called Edward Clark Jr. is alleged to have been attacked by 16-year-old Pedro Roberts for stealing a quarter he'd used to play Berzerk. Following the altercation, both parties were kicked out of Friar Tuck's. As Clark started to walk home, he was set upon by Roberts, who stabbed him to death. Pedro Roberts spent 11 years in prison for the murder. Some of this at least would appear to be true, and is backed up by reporting in the Chicago Tribune. Speaking of retro gamer, Berzerk's creator Alan McNeil was having no truck with the legend, and refused to lay the blame on his game, only going as far to confirm Bukowski's death. He told the magazine, "The unfortunate fellow was a beast and had to run upstairs to play the game. The owner of the arcade machine said he didn't finish the game. He was out of breath from the moment he arrived until he dropped. The legend is way better than the reality, the excitement of a game killing a player after setting a high score." Which is all well and good, except that the coroner's report apparently reveals that Peter Bukowski was 5'10" and 172 pounds. Hardly a beast. What we can take from all this is that at least one person died from direct exposure to Berzerk, another died following an argument involving Berzerk, another almost died playing its sequel, and that another might have died but probably not. It's hardly enough to blame Berzerk or Friar Tuck's or make a case for a cursed arcade machine, as fun as that might be. Although, there's one final wrinkle in the story which might give us all pause. If you do an image search for Calumet City, where Friar Tuck's game room was located, one of the city's most notable landmarks will come up. Remind you of anything?
The humanoid must not escape. The humanoid must not escape. The humanoid must not escape. The humanoid must not escape.